Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
We're working?
We're on.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name's Neal Drinnan, and on behalf of the Geelong Regional Library Corporation, I'd like to welcome you to the September Wine and Crime event. The Geelong Regional Library Corporation acknowledges the Wadwurrung and Eastern Maar original owners of these lands, and our library services operate on the Maar Elders' land. We acknowledge and celebrate the First Nations people of this land and the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. You can participate in this live webinar by clicking the Q&A button and typing your question or comment. You may need to touch your screen to see the Q&A and chat functions if you're using an iPad or an iPhone tonight. Also, this webinar is being recorded. So if you'd like to watch the discussion again or recommend it to family and friends, it will upload to the library's YouTube channel within the next 2 days. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm Neal Drinnan. I'm a local fiction and true crime writer. My latest book, The Devil's Grip, explored the legacy of the Wettenhall family murders in series. And my fiction work explores morals and consequence. I'm an avid reader. I owned a bookshop for nearly a decade, and with life being what it is this year, books have been more real than life itself. It's fair to say that crime writing in Australia has never been better, and the market competition is steep. Tonight, we're lucky enough to have two of the strongest emerging voices in the genre, Benjamin Stevenson and Kyle Perry. And let me tell you, both of these writers have conjured up a white-knuckled crime masterpiece to rival any of the star newcomers in the market in the last few years. Author of Greenlight, Benjamin Stevenson, has returned with a bullet to the head in his new novel, Either Side of Midnight, a mind-bending suspense-filled thriller that explores how technology is fast outpacing our society's ability to cope, especially in terms of our mental health and legal systems. Kyle Perry, whose background is in drug and alcohol counselling, has used this to inform his first novel, The Bluffs. His book has been described as Scrublands meets The Picnic at Hanging Rock, but I will say this now, The Bluffs makes Hanging Rock look like a Sunday school picnic. Crime is one of our most loved genres, but it's what is new and different and the parallels between this book that I hope will make this discussion really interesting for us tonight. So I'd like you to welcome both of our writers. And Kyle, new for me in your story is how many stakeholders we have investigating the crime and the disappearance. I wonder if you wanted to have a bit of a talk about how many players there are here.
Yeah, for sure. So my novel, The Bluffs, is centered around the disappearance of 4 girls while on a high school excursion up in the mountains. It's in Great Western Tiers, which is a mountain range in the middle of Tasmania. Following the disappearance, the book follows the journey of 3 characters, 3 point of view characters. We have our detective, Con Badenhorst, who's a Sydney detective who's kind of been relegated to Tasmania for a bit of recuperation. We have the teacher, Eliza Ellis, who was knocked unconscious when the girls disappeared. And we have Jordan Murphy, who is the local drug dealer or cannabis dealer, and he's also the father of one of the missing girls. So the story then follows these 3 journeys, these 3 perspectives. They have their own parallel investigations as they try to work out what happened up there on the Bluffs, who took the girls and where they are and how to get them back.
Wow. And Benjamin, both your novels have a podcaster as the detective. Now, that's something that I haven't seen before. This is a kind of new approach. What inspired you to create that kind of detective?
So I led a bit on my background as a comedian, working behind the scenes, you know, walking through TV sets while they're live in production, which kind of inspired the idea for Either Side of Midnight, in which a live entertainment program, you know, the ones, they're nightly, they're variety, they're light, there's a panel of hosts, they sit around, they chat. A nightly entertainment program is going to air, and the comedian who is hosting it, he seems a bit nervous, and all the cast and crew are kind of buzzing about what the episode is going to bring. They suspect he's got a bit of a thing for theatrics that he might propose to his girlfriend live on air. And right at the end of the broadcast, he turns to the camera, addresses his girlfriend directly, but instead of pulling out a ring from underneath the desk, he pulls out a gun and shoots himself in the head. So that's kind of where my podcaster comes in, because he used to work at the television station producing documentaries, and he's the only one desperate enough to take the money of the dead man's identical twin brother to look into whether or not it could be a murder. I haven't seen, when I wrote my first book, in which he was in the middle of making a podcast that then caught up with him while he was doing it, and he got involved in the crime. In this one, he's less actively making a podcast, but I hadn't seen a lot of that. But it's starting to trickle through. I think a couple of major films have used podcasters as cannon fodder in horror films recently that I've seen. So you watch them, and they're these. It used to be a journalist that used to always get in the way and get stabbed by the serial killer, but now it's a podcaster. So I've noticed that pick up a little bit.
And podcasters, I mean, they really are game changers in crime at the moment, aren't they? They are pushing action and activity around cases or opening them up again in ways that we wouldn't have seen a decade ago.
Yeah, I think it's this feeling that you, the person at home, is invested and part of the active discovery of these cases that are ongoing. I mean, Carl probably feels the same about YouTube, the way your Madison uses YouTube and stuff. It's connecting with people at home, and it makes them feel engaged and active, and that they're actually, people are going out and digging up gardens because they think there's bodies buried in them because they heard it on a podcast and they want to be the person that solves it. So it's bringing people into solving, which in terms of crime writing, you want your reader to feel like they're actively solving the crime. So it's kind of got that nice synergy.
And I think just on the back of that, you said how the reader wants to feel like they're actively engaged, and using this up-to-date technology like podcasts or YouTube, in the case of my novel, definitely keeps readers engaged because they really sense the immediacy of the story. They sense that it's current, it's relevant. So I think it's genius to use a podcaster as a detective.
Both of you look a lot at social media and what can happen through YouTube and through I guess podcasts is another. It's sort of feeding into that whole explosion of diabolical media mayhem. Do you think we should be kind of trusting teenagers with mobile phones and social media?
Absolutely not. Categorically not. And I say this as a youth worker in high schools. And if any of our participants have read my book, there's a conversation, a message thread that happens in my book that's based on real events that I had to work with or I had to deal with the fallout of at one of the high schools I worked at. And so it's really terrifying to have minors have access to information, have access to technology and broadcast software that adults can't police. So, they're still growing. They don't understand the world. They don't understand themselves. And if you can't regulate that, it's chaos.
I think, Ben, one of your characters at one point, she says that when her partner says that their child can't have a phone till after they're 16 or something, the mother says, you'll have to clean the blood off the floor. It is everything, isn't it, really? And
I think so.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think so. But just to add to Carl's point, like it's the way in which stuff is accessed. So in my book, I've used the live television as a way of, just from a dramatic standpoint, establishing a crime that has 1 million witnesses. And I felt like that was something fun to play with, but also it's something that a lot of characters through the book, you know, they look it up on YouTube. It's not supposed to be up there, but it gets taken down. You know, there's an access to it. There's a conversation in the book about the television program 13 Reasons Why, which Netflix actually re-edited and changed the finale of 13 Reasons Why because it was too dramatic and it was impacting people on a personal level. So in terms of what the television station in my book is broadcasting, they're quite worried about the ethics of what they've accidentally put out there, based on the fallout of this murder/suicide.
And what do you think, Carl, talking about the girls and their ability to, manipulate each other through social media? You think that there really is a lot of girls as powerful as one of your girls was in the book?
Yeah, so in my novel, Madison Mason is one of the characters. She doesn't disappear, but her twin sister does disappear. And she's a YouTuber with quite a lot of subscribers. And obviously, following the disappearance of her sister, her subscribers boom, and she kind of gets all of her followers to join in with the investigation and causes a bunch of chaos. And in terms of some of the feedback that I got, I think it was from my publisher, actually. She said to me, Kyle, I asked my daughter and I said, is this possible? Does this actually happen? Are there young girls out there with this many followers, with this much influence? And she said her daughter was like, yeah, mum, like there's heaps all the time. And then, you know, you can just Google it, have a look through. There's lots of instances of like public stuff happening through social media. But working in high schools, the online bullying landscape at the moment, again, it's very scary just because it can't be regulated, it can't be policed, and it's just all the time constant. And so in terms of, are there characters like mine in real life? Absolutely. And they're probably more horrifying than mine.
And
it's not the same thing, but I'll often come home, open the door, there'll be some paint stripped off the wall, the bookshelf will be dismantled, there'll be a drill going on above the window, and then I'll be like, what's going on here, to my fiance? And she'll be like, I saw an interior design YouTuber who recommended that we drill all our bookshelves to the wall, and so I'm doing that. And it's not the same vicious influence, but certainly these YouTubers say jump, and some people go, how high? Where should I drill the wall?
And just because you've got 1 million followers doesn't mean you have 1 million followers, really, does it? It just means someone's followed you somewhere along the line. But
yeah,
there's huge competition around that for young people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All of my bots on Instagram are genuine followers.
I bet they're not bots.
Ben, you're the younger of identical twins, and that feeds, I guess, into this story in a big way. Do you want to talk a bit about how that's influenced you with this book and explain a bit about the Either Side of Midnight?
Sure. So the victim is an identical twin, and his brother wants to pay my lead amateur detective Jack to look into it because he doesn't believe that his brother would do something like this because he knows him so well. And so I was interested in kind of looking at brotherhood and examining kind of what that meant to these two brothers who have actually, it goes through their history, drifted apart a bit, come back together. They've got a whole kind of history behind their relationship that I hope gives it some kind of depth or reality as brothers. And I wanted to pick that apart. And the reason I made them twins is because I'm a twin, so I felt I could connect with it. Because one of them was born 10 minutes before midnight and one of them's born 10 minutes after. So they're born on different days. So A, I get a cool title, and B, I get to look at nature versus nurture. You know, are they different people because they're born on different days? But what I really wanted to do with it was I just wanted to talk about brotherhood, which relates to Jack and his own brother, who aren't twins. But I want to talk about brotherhood. And when you put twins in a thriller novel, I think there's a lot of assumptions that come with that and what you might do that. Oh, he's adorable, Kyle.
No. Continue.
Oh, no. But I want to know his name. I love cats.
Her
So,
name's Margot.
oh, very cute.
Sorry.
So I think the onus becomes on the author as soon as you introduce, Kyle, you probably found this as well, but as soon as you introduce twins, I think in a thriller novel, there's certain expectations that I was really keen to subvert by actually telling the story of who these people are and not just using them as plot points or you know, taking the easy road that twins. It's the same as when somebody gets out an invoice in a crime novel. You're like, that's important. So I was keen to do the real story about actual brothers and how they felt about each other and how that kind of related to the kind of mystery as a whole.
Kyle, what drew Kyle? You have two sets of twins in your novel. What drew you to the twin thing?
Well, in the same way, I wanted to touch on sisterhood, and because I had to have my girls in the same grade because they're on the same school camp, it made sense that they would have to be twins. And then because of the nature of twins kind of having success in certain entertainment spheres, I thought that would be fun to play with. Hence, maybe, I don't know, comedy duos. And then also just playing with sisterhood with the other set of twins. But if you read the novel, you see the kind of there's a link between a gentleman with one set of twins and the other set of twins, and that was kind of where I wanted to set it. But primarily, it was about sisterhood with girls from the same generation, having the same issues, going through the same stuff, and how they acknowledged those and how they responded to those.
There's a depth to it. And what you do really well, Kyle, in yours is I think you understand that unspoken bond that twins have, that close siblings have, but I think it's even more unspoken between twins. And you can kind of lay in a lot of beautiful stuff just using that relationship. I think you nailed that as a twin. So.
Oh, well, good. Thank you. You're the first twin to tell me that, so I appreciate that.
Oh, well, ask my brother. He hated it, but no, I'm just kidding.
There's a great tradition that I'm sure you'll both agree in crime and mystery of the good twin and the bad twin kind of narrative, whether it's in films or noir sort of crime novels. But what I really did think of quite a bit about, Ben, was things like the connection, and I was telling, I'm working on a biography on twins at the moment, and that connection that you have, that you guys have, how connected would one be to the other in terms of knowing he was doing something? And I was sort of thinking about Chris Dawson in this instance and the Teacher's Pet sort of podcast. He was a twin, and suspicion fell on both of the brothers. Is that kind of, do you kind of know each other as much as people might think in that regard?
Yeah, I genuinely think you do. And I think in my book, it really serves the purpose of establishing the holes in the suicide that could lead realistically to doubts that could have a murder investigation. And you need someone who knows someone so intimately that they are able to say, this feels wrong. I don't have the evidence, but this feels strange, which I thought was really important to come from Sam's brother, Harry. And I just think that twins, you can know, he says so much for his brother. I mean, his brother is the victim, so he's dead in the opening chapter, but he's able to, in a way, speak for him and add those pieces. And they are his assumptions based on his brother's mindset. And I'm not taking huge logic leaps or anything, but I think that he's able to be the voice of the victim slightly. He can put on the glasses and look through that lens and say, this is what I see as my brother would have seen it, which I think is really important. I think great detectives do that in novels. And I think that was what I wanted to bring out in terms of helping the investigatory side. So I think people know each other intimately. Yeah. And
do you think it would be really, really difficult for them to fall out? I mean, there's issues with that in your book. Well, and also Madison and her twins, those characters are quite different in the Bluffs as well. it would be a huge thing to fall out with your twin, wouldn't it? As a twin.
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be extremely dramatic. It would leave scars that take a long time to heal. And that was one of the things that I looked at as well.
Yep. The Hungry Man, Indigenous voodoo stories, and the hysteria that all inspires in the Bluffs. Fascinating stuff, Kyle. I wanted you to maybe talk a bit about this, especially having this whole kind of Indigenous story in Tasmania, particularly, and having these legends that were either played with or blown out. Do you want to talk a bit about that, because it's interesting?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I need to establish from the start that it was completely made up, and that even in the book, there's a thread of addressing cultural. Oh, hello. Addressing cultural appropriation, because I didn't want to just make up an Aboriginal story and say, hey, this is a really good plot point. So it's definitely made up. And the Hungry Man himself is an amalgamation of three things. The first is the story of Alexander Pierce, who was known as the cannibal convict. And so he's a bushranger who escaped from a penal colony in Tasmania, and he traversed the wilderness, and legend says, or evidence says, that he ate his fellow escapees. And legend says that he hid out in the Great Western Tiers in the mountains. So that informed the story. And then also there's the story of this bush spirit somewhere on the mainland. My mate was telling me about him, and his name is the Tall Man. And if you're in his bushland and you look behind yourself 3 times, he'll take you. And so I took those 2 elements, and then I added in my own experiences, my own paranormal experiences. And so the result was the idea of the boogeyman, or the hungry man, that is up in the hills and hides and kills. And so that nursery rhyme, that schoolyard rhyme at the start of my book, was probably the first thing that came to mind when I was writing this book. And you'll find through the novel, the hungry man is kind of always there, always at the back of people's minds, always in the wings, waiting to come onto centre stage.
And it's always very easy for teenagers to work these sorts of things into a fabulous hysteria. Usually the fear's a game, but obviously with your girls it becomes more than that.
Yeah, and the voodoo thing was based on something, I think it was called the Catskills Crone. You should Google the Catskills Crone, which is a statue, a little statuette that was found in a cave in the Catskills Mountains in America. And she was wooden. She had a noose tied around her neck, and she had nails hammered into her eyes. And I remember hearing a story about that, and that sent shivers down my spine. And so I figured, man, I've got to have something like that in my book, because again, it triggers something in you. It triggers something like visceral voodoo doll stuff. And then, as you said, teenage girls and their hysteria, they can take that to the next level. Well, teenagers, full stop. I shouldn't just say.
Oh yeah, I totally would have been mad on all that stuff when I was a teenager. No doubt about that.
I personally loved the rhyming schoolyard chant, and I want to ask when the tie-in children's picture book is coming out. I think there's money to be made, Carl.
I think that was the Babadook, wasn't it?
Oh, of course.
Do you want to tell us the rhyme? I think it's fabulous. Kyle, if you can remember it.
Oh, I can't remember
No
it.
pressure.
I'll grab the book and I'll read it. Is that all right?
Yeah, Ben.
Yes.
Ben, something I wanted to ask you about, bulimia. Now, that's another wild card. I know we've got various investigators in crime fiction who have multiple sclerosis and all sorts of other conditions. Bulimia, why did you choose that?
Well, I think Jack has a very unique relationship with his brother and with his father, and same reason that I chose the twins that I chose. I'm very interested in those kind of bonds, And those bonds are kind of bound by people's interpretations of masculinity. Jack is a late 30s guy in 2020, and he works in TV, and he has PTSD, and it manifests itself in an eating disorder, and in this case mainly takes the form of bulimia, but it kind of bounces as any sufferer can kind of bounce between. But so it was really interesting to me because I wanted to make him real, and I wanted to deal with his fears and the way that he interprets himself into the world and how that would manifest himself in the way that he presents. And so it was really important to me to make him not debilitated by it. He goes to work, he's tracking down killers, he's doing all this stuff, but it's always in his head. And I think it helps him be genuine and be real. And what I was looking at, which I hope that people can connect with, and which certainly I kind of plumbed the depths of my connection with, is his own interpretation of his own masculinity, what it is that he thinks. One of the problems that he has is that you can't really be diagnosed with bulimia as a man in Australia, because one of the ticks on the checklist, or when I wrote the first book, was that you had to have an abnormal menstrual cycle. And so you can't get the diagnosis if that doesn't tick the box. And so he's kind of assessing, this isn't a man's disease. How am I a man? And how does this affect his self-confidence and his worth? And he puts that into his podcasts and his throwing himself at these crimes because they equal truth, and he can find something true that maybe he struggles with in his own personal life. And he grows a lot through it. He starts the new book at a better place, and he grows a lot through this book as well. So he's he's getting there, but I wanted to make him real, and I felt it was a genuine way to do it. And I just didn't want to make him have a drinking problem and an ex-wife, to be perfectly honest.
That's lovely for a change to not have that.
Can I just chime in on that, the bulimia thing? It actually, as I was reading your book, Ben, I had a counselling conversation with a man who struggled with bulimia. And part of the reason was really like the way that you presented it was really good, and the way you brought light to this issue, how it affects men, is really important, because one of the barriers that he faced was actually from a doctor who basically said, look, that's not that big of an issue. And because it's kind of eating disorders and men, especially bulimia in men, is not really a link that people have normalized. And he said, look, I can't talk about this problem. It's no one accepts it. Everyone looks down on me. Everyone thinks I'm just making it up. So I think it was great. I haven't read any other novels with a male with bulimia, and it was great.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, somebody asked Jack in this book, so what is it? You get like sick or something? And Jack kind of thinks, yeah, I'm sick. It's a sickness in my brain. It's not me throwing up. That's the problem. So it's kind of I'm interested in presenting something that he's unable to talk about. He can't even use the word. He calls it the B word. Yeah. So,
Good.
But it's also really fascinating when you look at the causal, his relationship with his brother and some of those things that have fed into that. I think it was very interesting, because you do hear that it is something that men suffer, and it's not really talked about a great deal. So that really was an interesting tangent. Now, Kyle, I haven't lived in cotton wool all my life, but what actually is angel dust?
And where can we? No.
It's also known as the zombie drug, or PCP. And there's accounts of, man, it messes you up. Hey, I've never taken it, but I've had clients and friends who have, and there's accounts of people who get high on angel dust and they nearly sever their hands from their arms, because they'll get handcuffed, and they'll just keep trying to pull the handcuffs off because they can't feel the pain and their minds are just going crazy. So it's the only real drug that affects your mind to that point where it turns you into someone else, into a beast, into an animal. That's why they call it the zombie drug. There were a lot of drugs and substances I could have played with, but angel dust definitely is one of the most hectic, if not the most hectic drug out there. Stay away from it. It will ruin your life. But also it has the very, very convenient plot device of bringing occasional amnesia, which was kind of where I began. I working in drug and alcohol, I had a bevy of substances I could choose from. And I thought, which one's going to cause some amnesia? Which one's going to throw an extra cog into this machine?
I mean, I remember it being talked about when I was young, 30 years ago, about people jumping off roofs and that sort of stuff. So it's not a new type of drug. I just wondered whether it was like an LSD and amphetamine kind of combo or something, or whether it was some bizarre concoction that, well, I'm sure you wouldn't know how it was made, but but is it something that people, you're seeing people use, or is it something that is like meth in regional communities, which has become quite a problem?
I've only no, it's not very common down here in Tasmania. Definitely not as common as ice. It's more common in the States as far as I'm aware, but I think people are pretty clued on now to the dangers of it, just because there's so many things that can go wrong. So yeah, we haven't seen a massive amount of it. People play with it. I mean, most people prone to substance addiction like to chase thrills, and they have what we call risk-taking behavior. And angel dust is one of the ultimate risks you can take. Mainly suicidal people will try it out, but definitely not something that's common. However, if you do put it on, you can put it on a marijuana joint, you call it a fry. That is a real thing that's in the book. So I didn't make that term up.
And it's not something you want to be on when your daughter disappears, is it?
No, it's what a coincidence that you take angel dust and then your daughter disappears.
Ben, you're a literary agent at Curtis Brown, and I couldn't help thinking, with your comedy work and your main character's raconteuring, how well does your ability to pitch a story feed into your novel writing?
Great question.
I think I'm reasonably good at the hook, which is, as you say, it's an asset from comedy. You have a very short amount of time to grab attention, and also with the agency that I work at, in terms of summing up books and grabbing a hook. So if I pat myself on the back, I write a very good prologue quickly, and then I take a long time to figure out how that hook I came up with is an actual book, and not just, hey guys, there's snakes and they're on a plane. So it's kind of like, I think I am good at coming up with ideas that are unique and interesting and can set the scene quickly and dramatically. But then you got to back it up, which is the thing that I am slower at. So I think it's an asset, absolutely, that I've kind of trained up for.
I really could see it at the beginning of the book when Jack's being lured into this whole thing, at how he was playing different people to, he half didn't want to do it, but at the same time he's getting himself in further and further. And I just saw that as an agent skill there.
Okay.
Personally, very interested to know the data of how many people read that tagline on your cover and turn away from it. Like, I know we can't know that data, but it's such a good hook.
What was that?
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
What was that called?
I'm just interested to know the tagline on, what does it say on your book?
On the cover of the book, it says 1 million witnesses, one impossible murder.
Yeah. I'm just interested to know how many people read that and then read the blurb and then put the book back down. Because to me, to read that, I'm like, oh, gee, this is a really, really good premise. Like, why didn't I think of this?
Kyle, you do something else. You keep a lot of balls in the air with this story, and reading it as a multi kind of tangential mystery. I wonder, where were you at when you started this? Did you kind of see the end? Did you see where everything was going to go?
No, I had no idea. I shoot from the hip when I write. I just started writing and just kept going and going and going. It's my favorite thing to do and I enjoy it. I get lost in it and I just smashed out a draft in the first 3 months. What we see now is, I reckon, about 60% different from that original draft. Just because I overplot, I throw in heaps of storylines. My first draft had 6 point of view characters. So someone actually asked me the other day, they said, how did you manage such an intricate plot? And I said, that's just because I threw everything at the wall. And then later on, I had to go back and rewrite and cut it all out. So I'm pretty lucky in the way that as a counselor, any kind of psychotherapist in the mental health, we're always double listening. And it's probably the same for you, Ben, as a comedian. You're always double watching. You're trying to find like the joke in a scenario. And for me as a counselor, I'm always following something. I'm following this conversation, but I'm also following this conversation. And
Being a novelist is just being a good observationalist, I reckon.
And drawing links.
It's interesting that you say that you overplot because I underplot. So if you want to throw any offcuts my way, I mean, beef up the word count. And I've quite, these books, I intricately plot them first before I sit down to write them. I'm working on my new one at the moment and I'm trying to shoot from the hip and it is stressing me out. So I'm going to quit shooting from the hip and I'm going to go back and plot it all out. It's not my forte.
By plot, I just want to take the laptop and throw it out the window. I can't do it.
Which kind of leads us to a question that we've had from one of our audience tonight, which I was going to ask you anyway. The future of, is there a future for any of your characters, Kyle? I'm guessing that there is with yours, Ben. I'm guessing Jack Quick, as exhausting as it must be for him, is he going to be a career sleuth?
The next book I'm working on is a standalone novel.
Mm-hmm.
This book started as a standalone novel and Jack found a way in, which was very annoying to me as a novelist. When I was like, oh, damn it, Jack, why are you in this book? But the next one is definitely a standalone. I'm doing things that don't fit Jack's life. And also I feel like I've been a bit mean to him across the course of 2 books.
Absolutely, you have.
And how many murders can this guy stumble across? So I'm going to give him a break until he stumbles into another one. I do have a few ideas for him down the track, but at the moment I'm working on a new set of characters.
Carl?
And on my end, I am quite happy to not write a sequel just because I'm really happy with the character arc. I think the journeys they take, have a lot of meaning. I think they had a lot of meaning and the way they ended was exactly where I wanted them to end. So I'm kind of petrified of not being a good enough writer that I can do that justice. However, I think a sequel is inevitable. I've had enough people asking me for a sequel and I've had enough people actually sending me ideas for a sequel, which I didn't expect. And some of them are actually pretty good. They're pretty good ideas.
That's fantastic. I've never had that.
You didn't answer my email subject line, 2 Bluffs, 2 Furious, though, I'm afraid.
So, Kyle, will that character be the post-traumatic stress investigator? Would he be your link?
Well, the reason I didn't plan on a sequel was because of the character arcs I was happy with, but also I wasn't sure which characters people would like the most. And primarily in my novel, the 2 characters that stand out are my men, which is Murphy and Con. And most of my readers are kind of either Camp Con or Camp Murphy. And then the majority are Camp Gabby, who's like the partner detective. So I was unsure which characters people were interested in, but because there's such an equal interest in both, I would need to, I think, write a sequel that includes both. So that, brings its own bevy of problems considering that I can't plot. So when I sell enough copies and get a major screen deal and can do this full time, I might have enough time to write down and shoot from the hip and see what I can come up with.
Yep.
But as for now, we'll just have to settle for my next novel, which will be a standalone.
Okay. You're going to read us the poem, weren't you?
Yeah, I'll read it out. I mean, it got edited so much, so that's why it's kind of, I can't remember what was on the paper, but this is on board. Yeah. Up in the hills, he hides and kills. Down in the caves, he hides and waits. The hungry man who likes little girls, their pretty faces and pretty curls. Don't believe what the grown-ups say. The hungry man will find a way. So I won't walk alone by the mountain trees, or the hungry man will come for me. Schoolyard rhyme found written on the wall of a girl's bathroom, Limestone Creek District School, 1985.
I mean, who didn't have poems like that, either in movies or in your own childhood? And something else I found today, Ben.
If we're doing epigraphs, can I read the poem that is the epigraph to my book? Which is, trust me, this isn't as indulgent as it sounds, but I think it'll be enjoyable. These are real, by the way. This stage is holy, and this is how we pray. Anonymous scrawl, backstage wall, Athenaeum Theatre, Melbourne. You are going to die in the arse. Anonymous scrawl, toilet door, the Comedy Store, Sydney.
I hope you've written something in those theatres yourself on the wall.
A few, not quotable in the book, I'm afraid.
Can I?
I did want to.
Wait. I got something to show you.
This is going to go forever.
I'll just quote this back to you because I thought I really liked this, and I just wondered where it came from. This is one of Ben's little pieces out of the book. A family is a bucket with a hole in it. You fill it up with a wife and kids, and sometimes it's so full it sloshes over the sides. It's magic. But from the moment you have the kids, they're leaving. From the moment you say until death, you're dying. It's a slow leak, but it's a leak. Where was that from?
That's from either side of midnight. I just made it up. I mean, that's not the best answer. I really dug deep and thought about all the concepts of the book. But really, I just kind of, I kind of wrote it down and I had this idea for what it meant. And then I looked at the words on the page and, it's a family is like a bucket with a hole in it. And I was just like, you can do better than that. And then I fleshed it out and I thought, actually, I think that really means quite a lot. And so I was quite happy with that definition. I mean, like I said, brothers drifting apart and it kind of sums up a lot of those feelings. That's nice of you to point out. Thank you.
Oh, look, I always like to put a few little things like that. Sometimes almost poems that one of the children make up, like Kyle's. And I think they're not poems that I would publish as poems, but they can be perfect in the context of a larger work like this.
I will clarify, I only read out my epilogue to prove that Kyle's was better than mine. It wasn't an ego swinging, all right, let's all get out our epigraphs.
It gave me a great idea because I found this journal out the side of a banjo's here nearby, and it's by obviously a drug addict who's got psychosis because it's full of paranoid ramblings. And so you gave me the idea to take some of these paranoid ramblings in this journal and put it in the start of my next book. So thank you. Thank you for that graffiti from the bathroom stall.
I'll wait for the royalty check.
And getting back to the plots, the ideal story, you use some of that stuff. The paranoid drug addict finds them and hunts you down. Reads it in a book.
Oh, it's a treatise on copyright. That's what it is.
Well, now I could get it back to him because it's full of songs and poems, but man, it's a dark place.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Kyle, when you might have felt that your book was a little remiss in terms of if it raised any issues for you. You sent me an email about this and what Ben's got at the end of his book and what you haven't got at the end of yours.
I was just because we had an email thread obviously, and at the back of Ben's book he's very thoughtfully and smartly put in a disclaimer with the phone numbers for Lifeline and Beyond Blue. Whereas my novel touches on some massively triggering themes, and I did not do that. And I just thought it was stupid because I'm the university qualified counselor and who didn't think to put that at the back of his book. So yeah, anyway, good job,
But it's
Ben.
tricky. It was a tricky decision because I knew while I was writing it that I was going some dark places and thinking about some dark things. And to be perfectly honest, the fair place to put it is at the front. And this was back in the days when we were allowed to go out, and I went and saw a theatre show, and they had a sign on the door with that element in it. And it spoiled the ending of the theatre show. And so it was actually a really tricky decision to, I mean, my book, it's a little bit more obvious. I mean, it's the fact that it's a suicide is in the blurb, and the fact that you're reading a crime novel means that there's probably a bit more to it. But just on a conceptual level, I actually think it feels like it's the responsible thing to do, but it's actually a really difficult decision on how and where you get that message across without, messing up the actual art part of it as well. So it's actually was really tricky. So,
and it's a tricky balance to even just putting trigger warnings in. And I mean, I don't really want to go down that conversation, but I got a few comments from people saying, why weren't there trigger warnings at the start? And there's divided research on how good trigger warnings are and how sometimes trigger warnings are a bad thing. So like the whole mental health is such a messy concept anyway. And so, I just thought it was really good how you had that at the end. And I felt like, oh man.
But I didn't have it in my first book. And I held Jack's bulimia as a bit of a plot twist until page 100 of the first book. And so in this one, it's right from the start. But in the first book, it was quite an essential component of this guy is struggling with something, but you don't quite click with what it is. So you will always have the sequel to put the warning in. So I missed it the first time as well.
Okay. Nice.
And I suppose like one of the things, perhaps with Kyle's book, I as a teenager, I probably would have enjoyed a book like that. I know it's not marketed for kids, and it's probably some of the content. I don't know. I don't have kids, so even though I had a bookshop for a decade and advised people on what books that their kids should read, and generally I knew, but I don't always think about it because I'm not a parent. But do you think it's a teenage book as well?
I think that there are topics in my novel that would be really, really important to discuss in schools. And I kind of write more from a young adult genre style prose anyway. So yeah, like a young adult teenager would enjoy my book. Absolutely. I know young adults that have enjoyed it. I had one of my ex-students run into me at the beach and tell me they'd read it and loved it. But also, it's pretty dark and pretty heavy. So I don't know. I don't have kids either. I guess at viewers' discretion. But the thing is, this stuff's out there. Like, there comes a time when exposure can be good.
And
I was just going to tell a useless anecdote, but I had this problem with I have a lot of cousins, and I know you're laughing because I tell a lot of useless anecdotes. This is from the comedian background, but I have a lot of cousins, and they're kind of quite a bit younger than I am. So when my first book came out, a couple of them were maybe 13, and they were like, "Oh, you wrote a book. We really want to read it." And their parents were like, "Oh, it's probably a bit old for you. It's about murders and stuff. It's a bit old for you." And then this one took me 2 years to write. So now they're 15, and they're allowed to read the first book. And this one's come out, and they're like, "Can we read the second book?" And they're like, "Oh, this one's a bit darker. It's probably not for you right now." I'm overselling how dark it is, but it was quite funny. It was quite a funny conversation I had with one of my family members.
I think I've always had a bit of a history with that, with nieces and nephews, and Uncle Neal's books being a bit too, risque.
Can I take that one step further and say that so I'm a Christian, and I'm actively involved in a few different churches, and I'm like on the preaching roster, and so when my book was coming out, I'd have people from church message me and say, I want to get it from my daughter. Can you sign it? And I'm like, you're not going to find this in a Christian bookshop. Like, this isn't a Christian book. There's swearing, there's drugs, there's violence. So
You knew that was going to happen, though. and I think your tale is both thrilling and cautionary, and that's the most you can hope to do with the sorts of things that you're dealing with.
What artwork is.
There might be for every teenager who's horrified at what those girls are doing, there'll be a Madison who thinks, "Oh my God, if I could get that many followers."
What a great idea! Yeah.
Now we're coming into the last 10 minutes, gentlemen, and we've only really had that one question about what's coming up next, and we've talked about that a bit. Is there anything else either of you would like to say about the books or speak to in terms of why people will love to read them?
I'll say what I liked about Carl's book is I think that the way that you detonate a series of plot twists at the end, I think was really clever. And I think it certainly got me thinking. And I pride myself, like you said, I've got a background in book publishing. I pride myself on picking endings, and I think it's something that I'm able to bring to my books, is that I'm able to trim out things that I think people will catch onto. But yeah, no, I was really impressed by your twists and turns there. So well done.
Thanks, Ben. Well, and we'll let everyone know that this has been Ben and I's first ever real conversation. So we didn't plan this, but the thing I liked about yours, Ben, I didn't pick your twist either. But as I was going through, I kept having these, man, that's a good parallel. And then there's like something else in another chapter that parallels something that happened in, one of your second chapters. And I'm like, man, that's a really good parallel. So all the way through your book, like you have these themes that just kind of, they echo each other, they mirror each other, you're following that twin theme. And I thought, I'm not sure how, obviously maybe it was plotted, but it was really clever. Like some of like it's hard to go into without spoilers, but there were some really good parallels. And I thought, man, this guy's a bit of a genius.
Well,
you both have a lot going on in your minds. I can see that.
I personally, when I write, I don't know how you write, but when I finish a chapter, I'll finish chapter one night, close the laptop, go to bed, next day, open it up, start the new chapter. If I decide on something that will affect the book, I don't write another word forwards until the whole back end of the book is fixed with the new plotline. And then if I change my mind again, or not a new plotline, but a refined theme or a refined plotline, because I think it's really important, those callbacks, rule of threes, bring something up 3 times, make it important, make it interesting. And in comedy, what we do is you bring it up the first time, it's funny. You bring it up the second time, it's kind of funny. It's not as funny as the first time. You bring it up the third time, oh my God, shut up about it. You bring it up the fourth time, funniest, right? And so that's kind of rule that I do with twists. But when I'm writing forwards, I never write forwards unless what I'm writing back is perfect. So I will never I'll never introduce a theme while I'm writing and think that's something for me to edit once I finish the book. I will go, I want to talk about this theme. I need to lay it in across the entire novel. And then I will keep going forwards, which makes me quite a slow writer. But that's kind of how I like to try and layer things in.
Bro, honestly, that sounds exhausting. You must be a machine.
I have to say, both of you manage. I mean, they're both dark stories, but there's comedy in both of them. There's moments where whether it's a line or, there's some really funny material that you've both managed to include. I've got a couple of questions here. One is to you, Ben. This is from Laura Bentley. She wants to know, would you ever include a comedian character in any of your books?
Good question.
Oh, so the lead in Either Side of Midnight is a comedian / television host. And that's probably as close as I'll get to doing an actual stand-up. I toyed with very, very early on in the development of this novel doing like a single set murder mystery inside a comedy club where somebody gets murdered while someone's on stage and then someone in the audience, and then you've kind of got all these different perspectives, and this kind of morphed into the TV studio. So that's and I brought a lot of my background. There's a caustic TV producer in there who is totally my comedy agent. He just says some stuff that you'll only hear behind the scenes of a theatre, and so I kind of brought all that in. I do love having smartasses as characters, so they don't have to be comedians, but they're all quite smart alecky sometimes. They often use it as defense mechanisms, but I try and make them all witty in a unique way.
It just does raise one other question that I did want to ask you about, because you were talking about twins and who writes the material and the kind of competition between your twin characters in the book. Who writes all the jokes with you and James?
Oh, so for context, when I do stand-up comedy, it's with my identical twin brother on stage. We're a musical comedy duo. It's kind of like Fly Like Concordsy. But because he's not on this Zoom call and has no right of reply, I write all of the jokes.
Kyle, this is from Belinda Fletcher. Could you ever see your book as a movie? Any ideas for the actors who play your characters?
Oh, man. No one's asked me that question. I mean, absolutely, I could see it as a movie or a Netflix series or something like that. In my mind, I don't know.
I've got one, if it helps.
Yeah, that would help.
I don't know her name, but do you know that brash New Zealand woman who's in all of Taiki Waititi's films? She's very dry.
Yes.
She should be Gabriella. I think she's like a prison warden, or she's the cop in Hunt for the Wilder People. That Gabby. That's my hot ticket.
Yes,
actually,
she'd be fantastic.
Gabby, if you've watched The Expanse, there's a Martian on The Expanse that definitely I think whoever plays her would play Gabby. But Eliza, I think her name's Bridie Carter. She played Tess on McLeod's Daughters. I think she'd make a great Eliza. And then when I pictured Con, I pictured him pretty like sandy-haired. So I would love to think I could get Chris Hemsworth, even though he's a bit young, but we'll run with that. And then Hugh Jackman for Murphy, even though he's probably a bit old. So we'll play.
I love how you listed the biggest stars in the world, and then you said, here are some flaws about them that wouldn't perfectly fit them in my movie.
Yeah, I mean...
Hotter than a Hemsworth. I've been saying that a bit lately. Who put that in my head, I wonder?
I'm just trying to flatter him so he wants to do the movie.
Let's hope he's listening. We've got 2 minutes left, guys. So I just wanted to let everyone know who's watching tonight that copies of the books are all available at Geelong Regional Libraries in hard and digital formats. If you're a member, you might like to take advantage of Library's new click and deliver home service, and you can get 20 titles a month that way. And I know also that for the next 2 hours till 10:30 tonight, you can purchase either side of Midnight and the Bluffs, and hopefully Devil's Grip through Torquay Books at 15% discount through their website. So if you'd like to get on to getting a copy of these, I can absolutely guarantee these are the two most white-knuckled books I've read for quite a while. So it's been so great to talk to you both. Ben,
yeah, thank you.
I wish you every success with the books. They both really deserve it. So thanks for a great conversation tonight, guys. And thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah.
We'll see you all.
Thanks.